Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. So I was reading Rebel Dream, which is book 1 of the Enemy Lines duology, part of the New Jedi Order, the big Yuuzhan Vong invasion book series, and I was reminded of one of my favorite little fighters in Star Wars. There's a scene where a New Republic fleet attacks the planet Borlias, which has been captured by the Yuuzhan Vong, and one of the starfighters in that fleet is the A9 Vigilance. I thought it'd be fun, starting with the Vigilance, to take a look at some of the lesser well-known starfighters of the Rebel Alliance and the New Republic. So let's start with the A9, and I really like this ship partially because it first appeared in the Dark Empire comics alongside the E-Wing. I think that those comics were actually pretty brave in actually turning to new designs to supplement the X-Wing within the New Republic Navy. You had A9 interceptors facing off against Palpatine's Dark Empire alongside other iconic ships like the E-Wing and the V-Wing. Like many good New Republic and Imperial ships, the A9 Vigilance actually saw its life begin as an Imperial vessel. Some sources say that it was meant to be the Empire's match for the A-Wing, which doesn't really make sense because the TIE Interceptor already exists. But it is interesting in that it is such a drastic change from existing Imperial starfighter designs. The best look and introduction we get to the Vigilance comes in Dark Empire 3, where Han explains that the good guys have gotten a hold of some of these ships after a manufacturing world threw off the Imperial yoke and joined the Alliance, with the A9 being the latest hot Imperial fighter. He further explains that overall it's a good ship, but they did also beef up the cannons a little bit. He also says they're meaner than the Death Star, but again, I don't really see any way that they're significantly more deadly than something like a TIE Interceptor. Alright, switching focuses though, let's return to the Galactic Civil War era, when the good guys weren't fighting the Dark Empire and the reborn Palpatine, they were fighting the regular Empire and the not yet reborn Palpatine. Have you ever wondered whether there's a starfighter heavier than the Y-Wing, but still a dedicated bomber, not quite the heavy assault fighter that the B-Wing is? Well, let me present to you the BTS A2 long-range strike bomber, otherwise known as the H-Wing for, I think, obvious reasons. The H-Wing was another product of Coinsire Manufacturing, the same corporation which designed and created the Y-Wing, and I mean, the design similarities between the two ships I think is fairly obvious. The difference being that the H-Wing was meant to be an even heavier combat weapons platform. It more heavily emphasized the role of the gunner, who is now responsible for a full medium laser turret as well as 2 light ion cannons. On the Y-Wing, you had the same cannon sort of pulling double duty. Additionally, the H-Wing had 2 proton torpedo launchers, but was also much more of a defensive stalwart. Its oversizedness, I don't know if that's a word, was even more exaggerated than that of the Y-Wing, but the thought was just the ship's overall technology would help overcome any deficiencies in that area. And I mean, overall, it was a successful craft, it just wasn't very practical for the Rebel Alliance. It took 2 to 3 crew members, it was a large ship that just didn't work well in Rebel Alliance hangar bays, and price-wise, it just made more sense to buy the cheaper Y-Wings. If you think about Rebel strategy at this time, it was largely predicated on quick hit-and-run attacks, and in that case, the Y-Wing not only operates just fine, but is really perfect for the job. If you want another weird Rebel Alliance take on the Y-Wing that never really took off, you can look up the M-Class, which is sort of like a Y-Wing just with extra steps. Very goofy looking. If you look into this topic, one thing you'll notice is that there are the gold standard starfighters, the A-Wing, the X-Wing, the Y-Wing, and there are many various offshoots, and really, I could focus the whole video talking about that. That's largely due to the fact that the Alliance would buy pretty much any starfighter they could get their hands on, and most of these fighters also had predecessors. The X-Wing had the Z-95 Headhunter, the A-Wing arguably had the R-41 Star Chaser, and additionally there were offshoot vessels like we just talked about. So although the Rebel Alliance would probably prefer to have the X-Wing, if they needed to settle for a close, less effective relative, they would do so. Another really good example that I've talked about in a dedicated video was the H60. This was a very early B-wing, which was a little less graceful, i.e. even larger and less maneuverable, but also lacking the S-foils that, of course, would make the B-wing so iconic. But again, another take on the assault starfighter, which the Alliance would use if it was what was available. On that note, the Alliance was also happy enough to pull from planetary or system defense forces, piracy groups, whatever really, if it meant keeping their navy stocked. A good example of that would be the Cloak Shape. These are ships which just generally weren't very effective. They were neutered for use in the private sector, but if the Alliance could get their hands on them, they'd put pilots in. All right, but let's do something completely different now and go from cheap to expensive and return to the New Republic era. And this time we will be talking about the Defender class starfighter. I believe I've also covered this one in a dedicated video, but the Defender was a state-of-the-art post-Endor fighter, most likely birthed from the new class modernization project, which gave the New Republic, among other ships, the Nebula Star Destroyer and the Endurance class fleet carrier. Those little arms, those are maneuvering jets, because this fighter is meant to operate not only in space, but also in atmosphere. Interestingly, the New Republic had ships which excelled in one of those roles, but not really many that could do both. For example, the E-Wing, or even the X-Wing, excellent space superiority fighters, less effective under the effects of atmosphere. The V-Wing was a speeder. It was perfect for operating in atmosphere, but it needed a special transport to actually move from a space-based mothership down to the planet's surface. The final ship I want to mention for this video is the I7 Howlrunner. I really like this one, partially because it is fairly ubiquitous within Star Wars Legends. It's another one first brought up in Dark Empire, but like I said, I'm currently reading through the New Jedi Order and it shows up there and even beyond. In a way, it actually reminds me of the Prey Bird, which was a post-Endor fighter the Empire brought into service because they couldn't afford to keep making the ties. The Howlrunner was Incom's attempt to ingratiate themselves to the Empire after, well, the X-Wing made its way into Rebel hands occasionally, but so did the Howlrunner, and overall I'd say it was an effective, if not somewhat boring ship. I like the design though, it's pretty neat. Actually, I will mention one more thing. For one, I just want to recognize that, yeah, I've missed a ton of the starfighters you might like, so let me know if that's the case down below. I think I should probably do a video on how in the Legacy of the Force era, Mandalore moves back into shipbuilding, and that's a really major plot point for that novel. They're building ships out of Beskar. Unfortunately, we never do get to see a capital ship lift off, but pretty interesting idea.